All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of San Carlos City Council, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency of the Housing Authority regular meeting. This is May 11th, 2020. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it
stands one nation under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all. All right, first order of business is if there are any changes to the agenda. Does anybody want to see anything in the agenda moved around or changed? Okay.
No changes from staff, Mr. Mayor.
All right. All right, moving on to item 4, we have a proclamation recognizing May 17th to 23rd as Public Works Week. And we have a quick presentation by Mr. Machida.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Just like to actually do real quick information that this coming May 17th to the 23rd is the National Public Works Week. Basically, it recognizes all the employees that are working in public works and all the work that they do. And certainly, we'd like to, on behalf of myself, as well as my staff, and all the engineers and public work officials working in San Carlos, we'd like to say thank you for the proclamation and recognizing May 17th to 23rd as the National Public Works Week.
Ron, you're muted.
My apologies. I'm just going to summarize our proclamation. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being in the city of San Carlos. And public works professionals in San Carlos are heroes because they do their jobs so well and they are generally unrecognized by the public at large. And I would just like to add that I consider them right up there with any other public safety department that we have. Without a good infrastructure in our city, we would be in poor shape. So I would like to congratulate and recognize our Public Works Department as part of National Public Works Week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next order is public comment. This is persons wishing to address the City Council on matters that are not on the agenda for tonight. There is a public comment card on the screen. If you will dial the number 669-900-9128, and when prompted, enter the meeting ID 452-388-965. Once you connect, you'll be placed on mute and queued up in a waiting room. When it's your turn to speak, the last 3 digits of your phone number will be announced and you will be unmuted. And by the way, we have items on our agenda later this evening that will involve public comment. Once we have our staff presentation, we will have questions by the council, and during that period of time, the slide you see now will reappear on the screen, and you will be invited to call in and queue up to ask your questions. And when we are ready for that, I will ask our city clerk if there are callers, and then she will allow you to unmute yourself and speak, and everyone is given 2 minutes to make their public comment. Okay, after having said all that, Crystal, do we have anyone who has called in so far?
Yes, actually, it looks like 3 people are waiting in the queue. I will say that 2 of them are trying to participate in this meeting with a video. So, Dakunha and John, if you can hear me, if you can please close out and call into the number so you can make a public comment audioly. I'm going to admit one of the callers who is calling by phone here.
Okay. Are we ready
Good.
for them?
Oh, hold on a second. Unmute. Good evening, caller. Phone number ending in 827. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. Please lower the volume of the meeting behind you if you have that on. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council. If you could please state your name for the record before starting your comment, that'd be appreciated. You are currently unmuted, so you may begin when you're ready.
Sure, great, thank you. My name is Heather Keck, Kaech, and I'm a resident of San Carlos. And I was just calling in to voice my feelings on the slow streets, the proposition to make some of the residential streets not entirely closed, but partially closed for the purpose of residents being able to utilize the space in the street.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually an agenda item tonight. It is going to be a study session, item 9A, and
Okay.
we invite you to save your comments for that agenda item when it comes up.
Certainly. What time should I call in for that?
Well, we have. It's hard to say, but I would say give it about. You might want to check back in about 40 minutes or so. That might be a little early, but I don't want you to miss your opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Okay, bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Crystal, is there another?
Yes,
another
we
public speaker?
do have another caller right now. Let me go ahead and admit them in now. Caller phone number ending in 034. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council. If you'd like, please state your name prior to beginning your comments. And if you haven't already, if you can lower the volume of the meeting behind you, that would be great. You are currently unmuted, so you may begin when you're ready. Oh, it looks like the caller just exited.
Oh,
Oh, no, okay.
did we lose them?
We lost him, and I'm seeing somebody with a participant name of Dakunha trying to log in with the video again. We are not allowing participants, the public participants, to participate with the video. So if you can please watch the meeting on Comcast Channel 27 or AT&T Uverse or on our meeting web portal. The link is on our agenda, and call in with the number, then we would admit you in to speak at that time. Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing any other callers at this time.
Okay, maybe if they call in and we could take a little break in the course of things, we might be able to let them speak.
Okay, I'll let you know if I see
Since
them.
this is still sort of an unusual dynamic.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the moment, we're going to move on to item 6. These are council communications and announcements. These are brief items from members of the City Council regarding upcoming events in the community and correspondence that they have received. And at this point, I am looking to see if, hang on just a second. I am just looking for, sorry about that. I've just got to reacquaint myself. Do any of my colleagues have any comments they want to make over about what's been involved in over the last couple of weeks?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, I missed the raise hand button.
That's all right. I heard you and I know.
Thank you. I just had 2 brief comments, one of which will be related to an agenda item that I'll bring up during agenda setting at the end of the meeting. I think, I don't know if other people are aware, but I've become aware of a pretty serious short-term financial challenge that the San Carlos School District is facing due to COVID-19. And in fact, they're looking at having to potentially cut a whole bunch of positions, librarians, tech support, classified staff, in response, none of which would be good things to lose because they're all necessary for a high-performing district. I've talked to Neil Layton, one of the trustees, about it, and I think there actually may be a way for the city to loan them some money safely to help them through the crisis. I recognize that doing something like that is unusual, and we have to manage our resources because we have our own challenges to face. But a couple of things. One is, I think we need to remember almost every resident of the district is also a resident of the city. And so effectively we are one community. And to be honest, as far as I've ever been able to tell, the overwhelming reason people come to buy homes in San Carlos, which keeps our real estate market afloat, is because of the school district. That's the primary reason they come here. So in that sense, besides helping them out if we can in their hour of need is the right thing to do, it's also in our self-interest. I think it's the smart thing for us to think about doing. So I'll come back to that in agenda setting about what specific idea I had. And then the only other comment I wanted to make was something that I learned in listening to Dr. Morrow this week on one of the county conference calls. We are moving towards a phase of this response where more relaxation is going to occur in the health orders. And so people are going to be faced with making choices of their own about how to keep themselves healthy. I'm not going to speak for anybody's particular situation. Everybody has to judge that for themselves. But one thing Dr. Morrow said really struck me, which is he doesn't know for sure because we unfortunately have not been able to do enough testing to come up with the real number. But he suspects that only around 5% of the population has actually been exposed to COVID-19. And so if we relax too soon, too quickly as individuals, we could be back where we were in early February, where 100% of the population hadn't been exposed. And now it's only 5% lower than that. So we could be back where we were and things could restart and get really bad really quickly. So that's just something for people to think about as they make their individual choices. Thanks.
Okay. Laura.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. I appreciate that. So as I've shared in past meetings, I am on one of the committees with respect to the return with the county with respect to the long-term planning, which is a 30, 60, 90 and longer term plan. Just to kind of put into context kind of where we are right now, the state is moving very quickly to reopening the state and is currently at phase 2 of the roadmap. And the 6 Bay Area County Health Departments are working together to deliver a consistent policy in response, and that will be announced shortly. It is important to remember that this is not a return to normal. COVID-19 is still spreading, and California is gradually reopening only where risk can be reduced. It is ultimately up to each individual to inhabit safe practices to keep the risk of infection low. And businesses are now being asked to implement safety measures as well. The government, as you all know, is setting policy to help create a framework. So more on the county plan, that's in draft form. It's moving its way through various teams, and I'm sure that will be published soon. And their website does have a wealth of information. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 quick things that I'd like to express tonight. Number one, I'd like to congratulate the Youth Advisory Council right here in San Carlos that collected over 170 boxes of diapers and wipes at their diaper drive this weekend, which will be donated to One Life Wellness Center, which is giving out food and supplies to families in need every Friday. So I wanted to congratulate them and say job well done. And I also just wanted to note that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're very fortunate here in San Carlos to have a number of resources right here at our fingertips. Star Vista is here in San Carlos, which offers a 24/7 crisis hotline, as well as a teen chat service, which is at onyourmind.net. We're also home to One Life Counseling Center, which provides accessible counseling to individuals and families. And the San Mateo County Libraries online has just a wealth of information and virtual resources. So I think in this time, we're all feeling a little extra stress and anxiety. And I think that May is a really important month to recognize that if you need a little help, please do reach out. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I just had a couple comments. You may have read in the newspaper, Trans ridership is down over about 50% right now. I think it's maybe closer to 70%. Samtrans is also for the time being because they just want to have people able to ride the buses. So the service has been cut back a little bit, but the ridership is down quite a bit. Caltrain ridership is down an incredible 95 to 98%. And that has obviously everyone at Caltrain from top to bottom very concerned. Some people have been wondering about the electrification work. That's basically a separate budget, and that does continue. There are some issues with the contractor over installation of foundations and poles and that sort of thing where the catenary wires are going to go. But the work is continuing. It's not on schedule at the moment, but they expect it to be within the next 30 days. So that's all I have. Adam, did you have anything that you wanted to report on tonight?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
Everyone,
great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on next to the consent calendar. These are items that we approve in one motion unless there's any particular item that a council member or anyone else wants to pull from the consent calendar. Does anybody want to either remove an item or make a motion?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, if you can remind me, I don't want to pull an item, but I want to vote no on it. So I believe when Crystal polls us, I just tell her which item I wish to vote no on. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good, thank you.
All right. I move the consent calendar.
Okay.
Councilmember Rack, if you could also read the two ordinances.
Gotta find it. Hold on, Crystal. Give me a second now. Spoke too soon. See, I've got to pull up what you put up there. If I can find it. Hold on. Is it meeting action list that it's be under?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I move to approve City Council consent calendar item A through G and item H, adopting ordinance number 1560, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, adding chapter 15.60 construction limits to title 15 of the San Carlos Municipal Code for construction time limits and penalties. And item I, adopting ordinance number 1561, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, amending San Carlos Municipal Code, Chapter 8.10, minimum wage, sections 8.10.030 and 8.10.040, delaying implementation of the local minimum wage increase to January 1st, 2021.
All right, Mark, I think that was item I that you wanted to vote no on. So that is so registered?
Yes, what I was going to say is that I am voting no on it. I support the minimum wage, but I don't support delaying it.
Okay.
I'm voting yes on everything else.
All right. Crystal, please call the roll.
I'm not sure, did I get a second on that consent
Oh, I'm
calendar?
sorry. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Okay. Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes on everything except for I, on which I'm voting no.
Noted. Vice Mayor Parmer-Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. We're going to move on now to reports to council. These are reports and updates on key city projects by the city department heads and staff and council, city council subcommittees. They're informative in nature and no action will be taken on these items at this time. So 8A is getting an update on the coronavirus, COVID-19. This is an update only. And I think Jeff Maltby's going to make that presentation. Thanks, Jeff. You might want to unmute yourself. Jeff, it looks like you're still on.
Yeah, we can't hear the report.
Sometimes he has audio issues and he'll go off and come back on and it'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm having trouble unmuting myself, so I'm just holding down the space bar while I do this. Crystal, do I have control of the presentation, or are you going to be forwarding it?
You should have control.
Okay, I'll do my best here. Okay, so a number of things have changed with our county and state health orders over the last couple of weeks, and the city staff has done our best to respond to those changes. So we'll give you a brief overview of some of the more significant changes that we have encountered over the last couple of weeks. On April 29th, the shelter-in-place order has been extended through May 31st. The order did relax some restrictions, such as allowing for construction and gardening and some other outdoor businesses to commence along with certain outdoor activities for folks, as long as they're in compliance with social distancing guidelines and plans for social distancing within the workplace for the protection of employees and the public. It also allowed for groups of up to 10 children to meet for educational and recreational purposes, again, as long as the social distancing guidelines and precautions are all in place and observed during those gatherings. On May 11th, the order was revised to allow for vehicle-based gatherings with some specific restrictions that folks can look into if they're planning such an event. And I know some folks are with graduation season upcoming, and I've even heard about weddings and those kinds of things. So. I don't seem to be able to advance the slide, Crystal.
Okay, I'll go ahead and help you with there.
Thank you. San Mateo County Strong programs in the process of their grants are going out to needy businesses. Grants funded directly by cities in the works should be given out soon. The San Mateo Strong Small Business Program received 110 applications from San Carlos businesses before the website was closed due to oversaturation. The county's not yet been able to determine the dollar amounts requested. They're working through the process, so we will let the council know when grants have been awarded for San Carlos businesses, how many were awarded grants and in what amount. The state's begun to ease restrictions slowly per their plan, as its 6 indicators do show improvement, including redefining what is allowed under its orders to facilitate opening in communities throughout the state. They're moving into stage 2 of the reopening plan, which supports the opening of some retail businesses. In San Mateo County and most of the Bay Area, these restrictions will be the same as the state, but will be eased at a slower pace, we're hearing. The state is working to continue to distribute funds to citizens to help with unemployment, feeding seniors in need, helping those needing sick leave, etc. The governor's budget May revise will be released on May 14th and will reflect a significant change in revenue for the state, going from a fairly sizable surplus to now projecting a large deficit. The state's FAQs now allow tennis among household members and singles who do not share equipment, requiring continuous monitoring. We understand from the county that they're sort of mirroring that. We're going to be holding off until maybe towards the end of the week to make a determination around tennis. The issue that we're having is the orders seem to require on-site management and oversight of the rules, as opposed to just posting the rules that are in place and trusting the public to follow them. That could be an issue for us, but we're waiting. Wednesday, the Parks and Rec directors in the county are going to be meeting, and we've asked our Parks and Rec director, Amy Newby, to bring up that issue specifically if it doesn't already come up as part of that meeting, to have a discussion with the other cities about what's going on and how they're handling it, to see if there's any illumination there and a path forward that we could help accommodate. We're continuing the Neighbor to Neighbor program in partnership with the Community Foundation. As Councilmember McDowell mentioned, the Youth Advisory Council hosted a diaper drive at the youth center and got an overwhelming response. I understand that boxes of diapers are still being delivered via Amazon to One Life Counseling Center, so that's great. I'd expect nothing less from our wonderful and generous community. Helping One Life Counseling Center with its food distribution program, with funding provided by the city and with other resources and volunteers. I know a number of council members have volunteered, as well as some of our staff members. So that's really a great and an amazing way to serve the community right now. We sent out another postcard and another spotlight newsletter to the community, mostly focused on opportunities to donate and or volunteer with organizations in the community. We're accepting applications for the rental tenant assistance program, which we're partnering with Samaritan House on. So that information is out to the community, and we'll be looking to see what we can do to help in that area. Community members, we're asking to follow us on social media, Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, and our website at www.cityofstcarlos.org/coronavirus, or call the county hotline at 211 for information and updates. You can also call the city hotline at 802-4347 if help's needed, or to volunteer in San Carlos. And we are planning to participate in a blood drive on June 6th. You can call 1-800-RED Cross or 1-800-733-2767, or go to the Red Cross website to sign up for the few spots that are remaining. Our City Emergency Operations Center continues to remain open in a virtual environment. We're providing information to the community and our elected officials through that process. We're supporting local nonprofits and their community efforts. We're responding to changing needs and planning for the slow reopening of city facilities and other business activities in the community. We continue to acquire personal protective equipment, PPE, for when city facilities can reopen. We want our employees to be able to do their job in a safe environment. We discontinued the citywide bulky item collection program now that Recology's program has resumed. The Sheriff's Office is issuing citations for various health order violations when warnings are being unheeded. So if folks are reasonable, or they didn't understand, or maybe just had something slightly out of kilter, they'll get a warning. And if they refuse to comply, then citations will be issued. Our building and planning staff have once again become very busy now that construction has resumed in the city. So they're wearing a few hats right now, still with their work related to our COVID-19 response, both internally and out into the community, and with nonprofits and those efforts, as well now as fulfilling their role in terms of providing oversight and assistance for private construction within our community. All construction is now allowed under the latest health order. We issued information to all construction sites to ensure compliance with hours of operation and physical distancing rules. We've received some complaints about noise, which was anticipated. We've also received some complaints from contractors about our slightly reduced construction hours. This is understandable. Contractors were out of work for a while. They want to get going on their projects. The community is still sheltering in place at home and has gotten used to the quiet many weeks that we had while construction was not. So we'll do what we can to try to mitigate those issues. If there are things that we can do, we will attempt to help both parties reconcile. But I think for now, we need to recognize that construction has begun again, and these are private construction projects for the most part that have already been approved and permitted. Public outreach status, we're issuing information via our website, social media, and the community support newsletter and U.S. mail. We're overseeing the city hotline, overseeing the neighbor-to-neighbor campaign, using signs, billboards, banners to inform the community about rules, restrictions, and opportunities to help their community. City financial support. The council at their last meeting made a donation of $50,000 to One Life Counseling for its food program. We continue to provide $1,000 of additional support weekly to the Meals on Wheels program, serving our community. The Community Foundation has continued with their grant program, ramping it up a bit, $10,000 to There With Care, as well as St. Vincent de Paul, Star Vista, an additional $5,000 to One Life Counseling. $2,500 for Justice at Last, $4,500 for Arbor Bay School, $1,000 for the Carmont High School, and $2,000 for West Coast Songwriters Association. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions the council might have.
Ron, we can't hear you.
You're muted, Ron. Oh, sorry, Laura.
I'm going to have to pay more attention to that. I apologize. Crystal, thank you for putting up the public comment slide. Has anybody called in that would like to speak on this item?
Yes, it looks like we do have 2 callers waiting. I'll go ahead and admit the first one.
All right, yeah, let's go with that.
Good evening, caller. Phone number ending in 034. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. If you can please lower the volume of the meeting behind you. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council. If you'd like, please go ahead and state your name prior to proceeding with your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. This is John Keener from the 1600 block of Chestnut in San Carlos, and just calling regarding the proposed concept of a safe, slower streets during the pandemic time. The one question or concern that we have is that I think it's a proposed 1 block slow street, and the concern is that that would create a gathering place. And the reason we say that is that
John,
we're in the White Oak.
John, I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That's actually an agenda item that's coming up. It's our study session 9A, and we'll be taking public comment at that time. Can you hang on a little bit, and we'll take your comment?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I'm not on the actual committee meeting, so I'm sorry. I thought it was just to dial in and record comments that you could then have. Okay, so
right. This is just a comment on this particular item, but I welcome you to call back.
Okay. Do we have to watch the council meeting just to know when to call back in?
Well, let's see. We've got one more update, and then we're going to be on that study session. So it might be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It depends on, questions from council and if there's any more speakers.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
No
Okay.
No worries.
I tried
Thanks.
to go on the web just to connect in, but let me see if I can get on the TV just so I know when. Or call back in like 10 minutes or 15.
Yeah.
Or, yeah,
You want to keep your eye on the TV.
Yes.
I'll try to get it dialed in. I've never done. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that. Bye.
All right. We'll see you soon. It's my neighbor. I could go down and knock on his door and tell him you can call in. Crystal, we have another
Yes.
public commenter?
Yes, I'll go ahead and admit them in right now. Good evening, caller. Phone number ending in 222. Thank you for calling into the May 11th San Carlos City Council meeting. Please lower the volume of the meeting behind you. If you will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council, and please state your name for the record before proceeding. And you are currently unmuted.
Hi, this is Jorg Heinemann. I have a comment also on the slow streets or pedestrian, Laurel Street pedestrian topic, which I think is coming up later.
Okay. So, yeah, it won't be long.
Okay, great. So do I just stay on the same line until then?
Actually, if you could call in at that time, that would be a little bit easier to manage. We have a lot of...
I see. Okay, so just call into the same way I did it this time when
Yes.
we get there. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you, Jorg. All right. Was there anybody else, Crystal?
No, there is nobody else calling in right now.
All right. So let us move to questions. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one question about a comment when you were talking about the tennis situation. My question may be a little broader than tennis, but in situations where either the state or the county are allowing reopening, even if if they continue to require or do require on-site monitoring, is it possible for us to have volunteer monitors or even hire people temporarily as monitors to, for the duration of the emergency, to have them fill that role if we have to do that? In other words, I guess what I'm getting at is if it's not too much money, even if we had to hire people, I'd hate to not be able to open something up just because we don't have a monitor sitting there. But I also don't want, I don't want the chief to put his patrol people out there either, because that would be ridiculous.
Yeah, we'll be looking in. We talked a little bit this afternoon at the staff level, so we'll be looking into volunteers, maybe with the San Carlos Tennis Club or that type thing. We could, yes, always hire additional staff. Seems not quite sure I'd want to give some thinking to, incurring an ongoing expense for tennis courts. We also have bocce ball courts and basketball courts and a lot of other things that could potentially start to come online in this way, and whether or not our ability to be able to do that will be sustainable is something that the council will have to consider down the road. But the volunteers is definitely something we're going to try to take a look at.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking at that. And again, just speaking for myself, and in the absence of even knowing what the numbers might be, since staff hasn't had a chance to look at them, I'm not adverse to spending some money if we are able to hire people temporarily, if we have to do that, just because this is an unprecedented situation. And I'm sure we've all heard or maybe experienced ourselves, people are sort of climbing the walls. So, if we can do something to help make life a little easier for people, even at the cost of a few bucks, why not? Thank you.
Ron?
You're muted again, Ron.
Allow him to unmute himself. Sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
Thanks, Mayor Collins. Just a quick question. Jeff, you mentioned sort of the tenant assistance program that they've sort of starting to take applications, and it might be for the next meeting that you could give this. I just would want to understand kind of where the budget is for that and how that program is going a little bit. So you may not know more now, but if you have any more to add, that's great. And if not, happy to wait till the next meeting.
Okay, I don't have any additional detail for the council this evening, but we will we'll continue to monitor it, which we have been. And as the data starts to arrive, we'll try to pull that together for your next meeting. Shouldn't be a problem as long as the program has progressed.
Great, thank you.
All right. Sarah?
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, when we were going through the presentation, I think slide 11 might have been skipped. And since it has to do with parks, I'm wondering if we could go back to that just so that you can speak to it a little bit.
Okay. Okay, so this gets to some of the outdoor physical type activity that's being loosened up in the state and county health orders for folks to be able to get out and do things. Again, we can have gatherings of children recreating now up to 12 as long as they're following social distancing guidelines. There are no team activities or organized sports allowed. No sports that allow for that do not allow for physical distancing. So, sorry to the rugby players out there, but that's just not going to be happening for a while. Members of a single household can recreate together. So we're going to be going on the honor system there, and trust that folks are going to be following all these rules. Basketball and bocce ball right now are not allowed, but I know those are other activities that are being discussed to see if there'll be future changes like we've seen recently with golf and now tennis. And we're looking and monitoring all those changes to the extent that they impact our city parks, and many of them do, to try to make sure that we can provide the community with those opportunities in a reasonable way and in the safest way possible. So thanks for pointing out that we missed that one.
Thanks for going back to it.
I noticed that, but I thought maybe you were intentionally skipping it. All right. All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. We're going to move on to 8B, which is to get an update on the vegetation management program. This is going to be presented by Chuck Lax. Hello, Chuck.
Good evening, Mayor Collins and members of the City Council. How's everybody doing this evening? Give me a couple of minutes here while Crystal sets up my PowerPoint for me.
Sorry, my computer is freezing. Just a minute here.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, Chuck, you should have control of the slide now.
Okay. All right. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to reassure you that we have not forgotten about our wildfire threat while we have been working on the COVID-19 pandemic. The San Carlos Fuel Reduction Program would not be possible without the collaboration of the Park and Rec Department, your Public Works Department, the Fire Department, and your Emergency Manager. So I've got a short presentation to show you what was accomplished in 2019 and what we're looking forward to accomplishing in 2020. Can you move the slide forward for me, Crystal?
There it goes.
So in 2019, we were able to use $100,000 from the city budget to clear 48 acres with goats, hand crews, and heavy equipment in Crestview Park, Eaton Park, Highlands Park, Vista Park, Arguello Park, Big Canyon Park, North Crestview Park, and in the La Mesa area. Here's some examples of some before and after pictures. Really what we were striving for was removing and thinning vegetation to be able to reduce the spread of a wildfire. Next slide. Again, in Highlands Park, you could see a similar thinning and removing of dead vegetation to reduce the spread of wildfire. And in the next slide, the same thing occurred in Arguello Park. In the next slide, you could see the goats busy in Arguello Park. It seems to be very popular with everybody in San Carlos, as we'll see those returning to the hills in San Carlos shortly. So in 2020, we're looking forward to using the FEMA fuel reduction grant we've received to maintain and improve upon the work that was accomplished in 2019. The goal again will be to focus in on Eaton Park, Big Canyon Park, Crestview Park, and Highlands Park. We're going to focus again in removing and thinning vegetation deeper into those parks and around the perimeter of the park. The goal is to work on 100 acres in 2020. I'd be honored to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Crystal, do we have anybody who called in for this item?
Yes, I do have one speaker on the line right now.
All right, why don't we go ahead and take that?
Good evening, caller. Phone number ending in 827. Thank you for calling into the City Council meeting. If you could please lower the volume of your meeting behind you. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council on this item. And if you'd like, please state your name prior to proceeding with your comment. You are currently on mute, so you may begin.
Hi, my name is Heather Keck. Last name is Kaech. And I called earlier to put in a few comments about the temporary closing of some streets. Are you guys to that agenda item yet?
We are it's the very next item, Heather. So hang on.
Okay, should I just hold or call back?
I think you probably, Chris would like you to call back.
Yes, if you can call back and to follow along with the meeting, if you want to watch it on channel 27, if you have Comcast, or channel 99 with AT&T, or you can watch it on our meeting web portal, then you can follow along and know when we're taking comments for item 9A.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure. And Heather,
Yes.
Heather, are you still there?
Yes.
Just before you go, just so you know, we're going to have a staff presentation. We're going to have 3 members of our staff making the presentation, and that I don't know how long that'll take. So it might not be 5 minutes. It could be more like 20 minutes, but I would not encourage you to get too far away from your TV or your computer.
Okay, I'll track you guys, on the portal then. That sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. Anybody else, Crystal?
No, there are no other callers.
Okay. Questions of Acting Chief Lax? I am not seeing any. Chuck, thank you again. It's important that we keep paying attention to our vegetation and what's happening with it. And nice to see goats in town. Where can I go to find those? Just to walk.
We'll be in Arguello Park and up on La Mesa in another month.
Okay, that'll be good to see. Okay, now we're going to move on to item 9A. This is a study session. We're going to be talking about closing streets in San Carlos for social distancing, expanding block party regulations, and closing the north blocks of Laurel Street to through traffic. For those who may be watching online, I'd like to outline how this is going to go. First of all, this is not an action item. We're simply going to be getting a staff report and talking about what things people are interested in seeing happen. We're going to have a staff presentation from 3 members of staff first. At that point, I'm going to ask our city clerk if we have a number of callers who are queued up. Normally, we take public comment before council asks questions. If there aren't any callers, I will take council questions first. I do suspect, based on what's happened so far, that we will have a number of callers. So I think it's probably going to be appropriate that we have public comment before we have questions by council. After that is done, we're going to have a discussion on what's at hand here, and we're going to make some decisions about a subcommittee and what we're going to do subsequent to that. So with that, we're going to start with, I believe, Steve Machida. Are you first?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. I'm Stephen Machida, Public Works Director. Next slide. So what we're discussing tonight is actually closing those streets in San Carlos for physical distancing. So Crystal, can you advance the slides, please? So the purpose of tonight's discussion is really to consider the closing of the streets to promote physical activity in residential neighborhoods, possibly using the city block party program. Consider possible temporary closures of the 600 to 800 blocks of Laurel Street, and then really obtain directions from the city council on how to move forward. Next slide, please. So we'll start first with the residential streets. Next slide. So as you're aware, the county health department ordered a shelter-in-place order due to the coronavirus, COVID-19. But what they were really also encouraging, even though we had a shelter-in-place, is encouraging residents to continue their physical activities such as biking, hiking, walking, jogging, etc. Unfortunately, because the sidewalks and streets have become more crowded, residents were really finding it unable to kind of maintain that physical separation at some locations. And so therefore, they really wanted to see if there's an opportunity to do some closed streets like so many other cities have done in California. So next slide, please. So we were really looking at utilizing the block party kind of permits or the guidelines. So here you have the 9 bullet points for block parties. So I'll really quickly go through them. They're estimated. You need to spell your estimated attendance. You need to make sure the majority of the residents on the block agree to the closure of the street. The area that's going to be affected. All activities have to be within the block. Sidewalks, public spaces must remain open. No hazardous activities. No excessive noise. They must meet the noise guideline. And then you also need permission from the city engineer. So, as you notice, the guidelines really don't fit exactly what we're trying to accomplish as it relates to kind of physical distancing and allowing for people to kind of recreate. Basically, block parties are really intended for short duration. And so once you kind of get into a longer duration, block parties are typically a half day, maybe a full day kind of event. Once you get into a longer duration, say a week or a month, it does become a little bit confusing because you do have a lot of the road closure signs, and people really don't understand fully exactly what the closure really is. Is it really a block party, or is it really a street closure? So anyway, just some of the things that Public Works looks at, and along with some of our other departments, is whenever we look at a residential street closure, we really look at kind of 2 things. First of all, maintaining vehicle access, and then maintaining existing facilities. So maintaining vehicle access, you could see the emergency vehicles, deliveries, and residents. So emergency vehicles we highlight in red. I mean, that is really critical for us to actually maintain. Make sure that our police and sheriff department have full access to any place on the street at any given time. So basically, we need to make certain that whatever kind of closure is, that we could actually open it up very quickly so that they could actually respond to that emergency. Then we're also looking at deliveries as it relates to grocery shopping, pharmaceutical deliveries, your internet deliveries. You could maybe even have deliveries as it relates to moving into a new home, or perhaps moving out of a new home. And then lastly, we want to look at the residents, that they always have access to their homes, obviously to and from their homes at all times. Then we look at the existing facilities. So when we look at a block closure or a block party closure, really looking at local or residential streets, we really don't want to consider collector or arterials. And you may ask the reason why. So collectors and arterials, we generally want to move traffic. Those are the kind of the major arteries, if you will, that get you to and from, say, 101 or 280. And so those we want to kind of continuously maintain access. So we don't really want to close those streets off. Then we also look whether that the streets that are being considered for a block party are, is it on a bike route or pedestrian route? And then lastly, we would look at whether that block party is going to be on a street that has some type of bus or public transportation route. In some cases, as you may know, like for instance, when we had the eucalyptus tree removal on San Carlos, we actually had to do some bus routes rerouting as a result, because we had a big crane in San Carlos. And so we had to actually map out the appropriate streets so the bus could actually go down and still make the appropriate turns. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the major concerns that whenever we close any kind of street is we always look at emergency response and what type of enforcement we have to do. So closed or limited access streets really increase the response time for fire, sheriff, public works, and utility companies. It's pretty obviously what fire and sheriff were, why we don't want to increase their response time. But for public works, say for instance, you do have a sewer overflow, we want to respond very quickly to alleviate that problem. Or if there's a utility company, you have a water main break that is broken in the middle of the street, you want to be able for them to respond very quickly and get to the site very quickly. The fire code requires a 20-foot emergency access must be maintained at all times. And so essentially that is the travel lanes down the middle of the street of a residential street. So that doesn't really include parking. When I think about a block party, you think of people kind of having picnics. So they usually bring out canopies, tables, chairs, umbrellas, benches, and perhaps other private property within the street. Well, this is not quite exactly like that, but potentially that could happen. And so this is one of the concerns that I always have whenever we consider having a block party. And then lastly, the sheriff's office, we will need the sheriff's office to actually help us to help monitor, to make sure that there is this 20-foot emergency access, and then providing type of education or perhaps enforcement of these closures, should that be necessary. Next slide, please. So I just want to go real quickly on what the full street closures are. So what we look at is, as you can see in the photo, we have these kind of plastic barriers. Sometimes they're filled with water, sometimes they're sand, but they can be concrete. These probably provide the best protection for the pedestrians and bicyclists because it really kind of keeps the vehicles and bikes paths separated. And the downside is it really kind of limits some of the street parking. Basically, if you're inside the barriers, how do you get your car out, or how do you get your car back into the street? So residents will not always have vehicle access. And then this type of barricade also has problems in the sense that, it's hard to get your delivery, your mail, your garden service, and even garbage service will be impacted because these do create barriers. So from a full closure standpoint, the bike pedestrian utilization is probably the safest. And again, as I mentioned, it really separates the vehicles from pedestrians and bikes. But from a public safety response perspective, probably this is not what we really want to do because it really doesn't provide that quick and immediate access, to a given street should it be needed. Next slide, please. So here we talk about partial street closures, and basically this is probably what most of the other, and I'm coming up to a slide of some of the other cities that are going through this slow street program. So partial streets closures, they essentially use movable barriers. Basically, it's a responsible entity actually is supposed to remove and replace any of the barricades that are moved. Unfortunately, sometimes these are a little bit difficult to monitor and actually ensure compliance, I think, because mainly these barricades do move around from time to time because people do move them. So that would probably require either staff to kind of monitor and make sure that the street closures are maintained, but that also means the staff may have to forego other duties as assigned. So the one thing I did really want to talk to you about is, basically a street is either fully closed or it's open. I mean, we do talk about partial street closures, but realistically, a partial street closure, that street is still open. You're going to allow deliveries. You're going to allow, your local traffic. You're going to allow your gardeners and whomever visitors to go through. Unfortunately, because you're still allowing that traffic, even though it might be limited, that street is still open, and so it does kind of create a somewhat of false sense of security for those pedestrians and bicyclists that use that street because they assume that street or block is actually closed. Yet, here comes the Amazon or internet delivery truck coming down, kind of looking for specific address, not realizing there's a child or perhaps a bicyclist that's coming out of the driveway. And so these are the really concerns. So when I say a partial street closures, it really is a partial in the sense that this is how we would close it down, but it really is a street that's truly open. So next slide. So here's kind of a typical picture of what we see in the residential streets in San Carlos. Basically, you have the center area, and that would be essentially reserved for the through traffic, but it's also reserved for the emergency vehicle. And again, as I mentioned, that's 20 feet. So the pedestrian walkway is really kind of at 10 feet approximately on either side. It includes the sidewalk and probably lane of where you would normally have street parking. But as you're probably well aware, certainly during this shelter in place, our streets are fully parked. And so one of the things is that means people who need to walk on the street, they're actually going to be walking within that emergency vehicle access zone. It's a little bit concerning because as people kind of move around and you kind of squeeze between the bumpers of each car, it's one thing if you're a pedestrian watching it very carefully. However, if you're a smaller child, or somebody that maybe is not very clean and you kind of dart in and out between bumpers, vehicles may not be able to see them very quickly. Next slide, please. So service impacts. Again, I kind of keep going over and over, but we have the local streets, local residential streets. Those service impacts are garbage collections. This is going to be on a weekly basis. That includes your recycle, your paper and debris, your home services and deliveries, basically your gardeners, your internet groceries, routine utility service. This could be your internet, your Comcast TV, phone. And it also will be affecting your parking, residential construction. So these are the kind of items that we really do need to be concerned about whenever we close the streets. Next slide, please. So I did a really quick inquiry of some of the other agencies within the peninsula. I think you probably know about Redwood City. I think San Mateo is doing a partial closure. City of Burlingame is doing a pilot on a street closure. Foster City is doing a closure where they actually close the street right adjacent to a trail. And obviously, probably most people know about the Oakland and San Francisco doing some type of street close, as well as City of Alameda. So some of the cities that have not or are not considering that least now, the town of Colma, the city of Pacifica, Brisbane, South San Francisco, Belmont, David City, and the town of Woodside. In my discussion with these agencies, most of them had indicated, they're generally kind of smaller cities. They're suburban in nature, and so they really didn't feel that this was really needed for them at this time. And we're kind of in that kind of middle where we're not 100% suburban, but we do have quite a bit of residential units. So next slide, please. So after consideration of kind of the major things, our safety of our community and some of the pedestrian bicyclists, one of the real concerns is from a staff perspective, we're really not recommending that we do local or residential street closures, for this. I think because mainly we're really concerned about, maintaining the emergency access. It does create a false sense of security for pedestrian bicyclists. As I mentioned, there's no such thing as a partial closure of a street. It's either open or it's closed. We really feel that potentially this could encourage public gathering, and basically this is inconsistent with the current health order. It will impact local parking, home delivery, mail, garbage service, and other services provided to the residents. And it does require constant monitoring to ensure proper street closure. I guess the one last thing I did want to make mention is, I just really did a quick review of all the parcels, or most of our parcels in our community, and probably for the most part, about all parcels are maybe 3/4 mile or less, from a developed park, a school, a field, or some type of trail. And as our parks are starting to, more of our maintenance is starting to be on the uptick or ramped up, we're in preparation of going to see a lot more of this activity. So what I'm trying to get at is I think we're providing a lot of these activities. They're going to come online here shortly. Assuming the health order is lifted, in which case then we could see more people will actually be outside and gathering kind of using some of the other parks and trails that are available to them. So next slide, please. So that really concludes the residential side, and I'll go right into Laurel Street unless there's some other additional questions that you want to talk about. So the temporary closures of the 600, 800 block of Laurel, basically what we're looking for is encouraging pedestrian activities in the downtown, allow restaurants to serve more customers while practicing physical distancing once they can reopen. They assist businesses during this time. Wheeler Plaza Garage is available, and it's approximately 1,000 feet or so from mid-block of the mid-700 block of Laurel Street. That's just kind of the midpoint, if you will, of between 3 blocks, the 600 through the 800. Removal of street parking, and that's just one of the downside is by closing off the street, you're actually removing a lot of the street parking on Laurel as well as the accessible spaces. And one of the things that, if we do decide to move forward is that we'll have to do some fairly extensive outreach and receive concurrence from all the merchants on Laurel Street that, this is something that they want to do. Next slide, please. So this slide, you probably saw a little bit, it's a little bit different than one of the residential. Again, we talked about maintaining vehicle access, maintaining existing facilities, and then, but the 1/3 column is minimize the impact. And so I'll just really focus on that. So minimize the impact is, basically, if we're going to be closing the street, it will be impacting all the residential, all the commercial or businesses along Laurel. It will affect restaurants as well as other non-resident restaurants or eating type facilities. And it will also impact some of our community events that we might have, whether it's the farmers market, some of the other activities that we have, wine stroll, some other things that we have in the downtown. Next slide. These are kind of the same photos I showed you earlier, the full street closure devices as well as the movable street closures. So we probably use something very similar. We also see this slide once before, where again, we're taking emergency issues we look at it very importantly. We want to make sure that we comply with it. But basically, we want to minimize, or we want to make sure that the response time for fire and sheriff are maintained. The 20-foot emergency access. We really don't want any street furniture, canopies, tables, etc. within the 20-foot road. And then the sheriff's office would actually help monitor and provide enforcement of these street closures. So next slide, please. So here's a picture of Laurel Street. And so if you could look at Laurel, basically, I guess the best way to put it is from the 2 drainage valley gutters, that's approximately about 22 foot in width. So that's the area, essentially it's the travel lane on Laurel. So that's the area that we would need to keep available for emergency vehicles. So we have approximately a 14-foot pedestrian walkway that would include the kind of angled as well as the sidewalk on either side of the emergency vehicle access. If we were to close the 600 through 800 block, we would lose we would lose 154 street parking spaces. And I believe there were 6 accessible spaces in this route as well. So, one of the concerns is, that would be, one thing is to kind of lose some of that parking, but we also wanted to look at, are there other options out there that possibly could evaluate? And so we came up with the idea of looking at, instead of closing Laurel Street, could some of our parking plazas be converted over into kind of this area that some of the restaurants and commercial business could use? Basically the city owns parking plazas. So we would actually, in this case, the Sweet Clark Plaza, what we could do is just barricade off at the 2 driveways. Essentially what this would do is would maintain Laurel Street for vehicle access. So although parking would not be removed, on-street parking would not be removed from Laurel, we would lose about 110 parking stalls in Clark Plaza. This is just an example. And it would probably impact the garbage and delivery service. So, we could look at this as well as perhaps the surface lot near Wheeler Plaza Garage. That could also be an opportunity to have that instead of closing Laurel Street itself. So we would have to kind of explore that a little bit more closely. So other options that we would consider other than a full street closures is what if we considered like a limited time closure of Laurel Street. Basically, it could be from late afternoon to early evening. Emergency access and deliveries would still be maintained at all times. One of the nice things about doing this is, you can have the regular day-to-day activities kind of occur in the downtown and then closing off at the evening. And because you actually close down Laurel, perhaps there could be a parking or valet program kind of instituted where instead of losing that parking in front of your businesses where people cannot use them, you have a valet that could shuttle the car perhaps either to Wheeler Garage and then allow them to come back and use the valet service to kind of drop off the car or pick up the car. The one downside of doing this for the late afternoon to evening is you would actually have a setup and take down every day, in which case, one of the nice things about having a fully blocked street is, sure, you have to maintain it, but you don't have to move barricades around as much as every day. Next slide. So the fiscal implications, what we see is that there's future costs to consider should the program move forward. What we want to look at is, cost to study the issues, what it would really take, what is the logistics to go through that we would need to calculate, what kind of materials we might need, the time that we need to focus on making sure that it is safe. And together, we really need to kind of work with all the relevant departments, fire, police, Parks and Rec, planning, conduct outreach and education for all the community as well as the businesses. We need to update our regulations moving forward just to make sure that we can do all this. And in some cases, for instance, I've talked to some colleagues where I believe this is San Mateo. San Mateo is actually considered 25th Avenue would be very similar to our Laurel Street. One of the things I mentioned is how would they be handling the kind of liquor license if it were going to be the table or on the outside or in the parking area. And that would be something that we would have to consider, go through the ABC to make sure what kind of permit would be needed and can it actually be obtained. We would need to process the permit application, prepare any signage and barricades, and then monitor activity and enforce any regulations. So I think, maybe just to sum up, the next slide, this one. Really to sum up is, the concern that I think from a staff perspective, we're really concerned about closing streets for residential. I think, as I mentioned, it's mainly for safety. But from the Laurel Street program, I think there's various options that, council could consider, and, we would entertain kind of your direction on, what you wish us to proceed with. So the options are available to council as you provide feedback and direction on possible street closures and any type of implementation that you would like us to look at, and then provide alternate direction. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, Steve, before we continue, I had a note here that we were going to possibly hear from Al Savay and Chief Dury. Is that, do they want to weigh in before we take public comment? Or are they there for backup for you for questions?
I believe they're backup for questions.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overlooking some part of the presentation that they might be anticipating making.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Crystal, I assume we have some members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes, I do see one person in the queue at this moment. I'll go ahead and...
Just one?
For now. So we'll go ahead and admit this caller in first.
All right.
Good evening, caller. Telephone number ending in 222. Thank you for your patience in calling back. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council. And if you could, please state your name before proceeding with your public comment.
Thank you. This is Jorg Heinemann. I live on Glasgow Lane up by Highlands Park. I'm really excited to see the council considering both of these topics. I'm a strong supporter both of the Laurel Street temporary closure as well as of Slover Streets for a number of reasons. First of all, I think the safety concerns, I think we all share those. I think the communities that have already adopted these also have those same concerns, as do the many cities throughout the world. A number of European cities, in fact, all the major European cities have implemented things like what we're considering, and actually even more significant and permanent solutions over time. So while I respect the challenges that those bring, I think there's a lot of precedent that these have been solved and that we can also solve those. I encourage us to think a little bit longer term. This COVID-19 impact is going to hit us for at least a couple of years. And the Laurel Street shutdown in particular, giving the opportunity for restaurants to add outdoor seating with more physical distance, is probably the difference between life and death for many of our restaurants on Laurel. The science, at least as what I'm seeing, I think is going to tell us that outdoors trumps indoors by a lot, and that's going to add to the safety factor and the feeling that people get that physical distancing and being safe in restaurants and patronizing those can be accomplished much more readily if we simply give them more space. And asking restaurants to just operate at 25% capacity, anyone that knows anything about the restaurant industry is going to realize there's no way that math works. So we've got to find a way to help them expand their physical space. And then just thinking more broadly, shutting down Laurel Street, taking a few cars off that road and a few parking spaces, and instead allowing it to be, pedestrian traffic, will bring more people to into our businesses. Think about, other areas around the world that have done this. The 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, for example. Virtually every city in Europe in the last 10 to 20 years has slowed their car traffic massively, taken it down to 20 miles an hour or less in most streets, and made it easier for bikes and pedestrians to get around. And the impacts socially and economically have been phenomenal, and in the long run address the concerns that we're all feeling around parking and congestion and so forth, simply by helping incentivize folks to get out of their cars and instead find ways to walk and ride their bikes and so on. So anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for considering this. I'm hopeful we can get something like this done, at least as a temporary test to see how it pans out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jörg. Crystal, do we have another public comment?
Yes,
person?
we have 3 people lined up, so I'll go ahead and admit the next caller.
Hey, Crystal, before we do that, do we have any mechanism for displaying a timer on the screen? Otherwise, I have one here that I could use.
I can't put it on the screen, but I can set it up so that the caller can hear the beeping sound when it's 30 seconds coming up.
That would be great, and we should probably talk about an on-screen timer for the future.
Okay,
So
we'll go ahead and try the beeping sound. So the next caller is caller with the phone number ending in 040. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting.
Hi, everybody. I'm here. It's Mark Bauhaus. I'm on Devonshire, a 26-year resident. And the last caller was articulate, and I share the same kinds of views. I totally support Slow Streets initiative and closing part of Laurel. I actually think other cities have addressed these issues, and so I would encourage the council to explore the art of the possible. What have other towns done in San Mateo, Brook City, Mountain View, as well as across the nation in Europe, and even hard places, Paris, New York City, San Francisco have done things like this. And we don't have to go that far. The local towns have solved a lot of the issues that were raised, but gosh, let's go. This is the time to go make this city of good living kind of move forward in this space. And I think others have paved the way. And I actually think maybe we're looking at the safety issue upside down a little bit related to the previous caller's comments. With COVID, our streets, certainly when I walk and run around town, the streets are full of people on bikes and scooters and walking, and they're sort of disregarding cars and just being out in the middle. And sometimes I actually worry about it. I think we have a safety issue right now. And thank goodness we're all being a little safer and carefuler as we drive, I think. But there's just a lot of people already in the streets, and we better figure out how to enable that with a slow street type of initiative that gives people fair warning in places where there may be a lot of people out and about. That can be done still with emergency services in place and so on. But we need to enable safety, and I think the previous caller was exactly right. This virus crisis is likely to go on for a year or two until vaccines are fully deployed and working on and off. So the people in the streets are going to be there, and certainly downtown isn't going to be able to recover unless, I think of Pete's with its line out the front door and people with sort of front door business models and street pickup and restaurants that need to be able to space out onto a big wide sidewalk and not worry about parking spaces and cars. And I don't think we'll have a downtown unless we enable people to be able to walk and bike. And still for older and disabled people, be able to park at Caltrain or on Walnut Street, very, very close by. But I think we're in a different world now. We've got to figure out how to enable the kind of safety and the kind of traffic and space that downtown's going to need to be able to recover. So I sure hope that you will look at the art of the possible and learn from other cities, and let's go do a trial until October on both of these initiatives. And I think we'll be a better city for it, frankly. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Crystal, we have another caller?
Yes. Good evening, caller with the telephone number ending in 598. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. You will have 2 minutes to address the council. And when your 2 minutes is up, you will hear a beeping. So if you can wrap it up at that time, that would be appreciated. Caller ending in 598, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, please introduce yourself and then you may proceed.
Okay, Honorable Mayor Collins and Honorable City Council members, my name is Andrew Hsu. I'm a San Carlos resident. I live on Bayview Drive in the hills. I'm a father of 3, avid bicyclist, and also, incidentally, a member of the board of directors of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So just like Mark and Jorg before me, I'm calling to speak enthusiastically to voice my support for Slow Streets Network in San Carlos. I realize that the city is currently discussing, a couple of implementations and feasibility of implementing the Slow Streets Network, and I urge City Council to act quickly. Many of our neighboring cities, including Redwood City, Foster City, San Mateo, Burlingame, have already safely done so. And of course, you already know about Oakland, San Francisco, Portland, New York City, Madrid, and Seattle, soon to be permanent Slow Streets Network. So there must be a wealth of information to address the safety concerns that have already been raised. As you already know, due to COVID-19 shelter in place, there are fewer cars on the road, and people, especially kids, are out on the streets in record numbers. So everyone already has this false sense of security that our streets are empty, hence safe. However, creating an actual Slow Streets network in what I guess would be called a partial street closure implementation will communicate expectations for no-through traffic and how local and essential car traffic can share selected roads that are on this network. For example, such rules as limiting car speeds to 15 miles per hour and restricting street parking will, set expectations for both drivers and for other users of the street. And this way, pedestrians, joggers, bicyclists, and children can feel safe to use the road alongside local and essential vehicles. So please take the opportunity during this otherwise difficult pandemic to do some good for our community and your respective legacies. We owe it to ourselves and our children to create a community with a network of slow streets. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Crystal, do we have another caller?
Yes, we have 2 more callers.
Okay.
Good evening, caller ending in 827. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. You will have 2 minutes to address the council. I'll go ahead and start your timer as soon as you introduce yourself. And once your 2 minutes is up, you'll hear a beeping, and if you can wrap it up at that point, We would really appreciate it. You are currently on mute, so you may begin.
Yes, hello?
Yes, hi.
Yes, hi. My name is Heather Keck, and I was calling in hopes that the council would reconsider their decision regarding the partial street closures. I just wanted to speak to that.
Okay, yes, please proceed.
Okay, great, yes. So I know that myself and my neighbors, we were discussing this earlier this afternoon, and we are very much in favor of making the partial street closures an option. And I appreciate the concern, the safety concerns the council has brought up about a false sense of security. And I think, well, I know it, particularly on our street, that we as parents would remain vigilant to supervise our kids and obviously ourselves to make sure that we're not putting anyone, ourselves or anyone else at danger, at risk. I think right now it would almost, as other people have mentioned previously, I think it would actually work in favor of promoting safety. I think any kind of signage or blocks that are up would indicate to drivers to be cautious, to be on alert. I feel like oftentimes those who are passing through come very quickly down the street with little regard to pedestrians or who might be potentially near the street. And so I think that would cause as a warning for drivers. And I also wanted to just speak to the point somebody made in regards to parks and schools potentially reopening in the near future, in terms of that would be a place where children and families could go to recreate. And yet there's still obviously the concern or the awareness of not wanting to have massive social gatherings. And so I'm just concerned that as those places open, if we don't have the opportunity to utilize our streets and our own neighborhoods, that those locations will become quite impacted. And so it just seems to make more sense to me if we can utilize the space that we actually have within our neighborhoods, that there would be smaller groups of safe socializing going on our own streets versus kind of, the masses gathering once there's things lifted off of school campuses and trails and those types of things. So yeah, those are a couple of my thoughts that I wanted to share.
Okay, well, thank you, Heather.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Crystal,
Bye-bye.
Another caller?
Yes, we have two more in the queue. Caller ending in phone number 715. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. You will have 2 minutes to address the council. I will start the timer after you introduce yourself. Once your 2 minutes is up, you will hear a beeping. So if you can wrap it up at that point, that would be great. You are now unmute and you may begin.
Hey, good evening. My name is Andrew. I live on Hall Street in Greater East San Carlos. I wanted to call in and just let you know that I fully support whatever we can do to make San Carlos more pedestrian and bike friendly. I have a small child, for example, that I push around in a stroller, and it's pretty hard to get around people on the sidewalk and kind of still maintain a safe distance. So I like the idea of closing the streets. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of a more permanent street closure for Laurel Street. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which has a downtown mall, which is pedestrian only, called Pearl Street. And it was a really wonderful place, both for business, like very thriving business area, as well as a wonderful place for like families and people to hang out. So just wanted to let everyone know that. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Crystal, I think you said we have another caller.
Yes, we have our last one here. Okay, good evening, caller ending in 277. Thank you for calling into the San Carlos City Council meeting. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council, and I'll go ahead and start the timer after you introduce yourself. And once your 2 minutes is up, you'll hear a beeping, and if you can start to wrap it up at that point, that would be great. You are now unmute, so you may begin.
Hi, this is John Rethins. I live on Britton Avenue. I've been a San Carlos resident since 2007. I've got two small kids, ages 8 and 5. And during this quarantine, we've spent an enormous amount of time riding bicycles and scooters around town. And I'm just calling to voice my support for, the street closure or slow down concept. I think, folks, well-meaning folks have mentioned, there may be a safety concern about setting expectations. I think any of us who've been out on the road in the streets of San Carlos during this quarantine have noted that they're full of people on bicycles and scooters and kids and older folks as well. I also regularly jog around, and as someone pointed out earlier, it's really tough to keep everybody on the sidewalk when you're also trying to be responsible and maintain social distance. So I think that a move like this would simply be recognizing the reality of what's already going on, and if anything, add an element of safety by setting some expectations around roads and how cars should be behaving on them. The other item to keep in mind is, there has been this bike plan process that's been going on for many, many months already. I'm familiar with the process. I've participated in the community days. And there's some great ideas that are in there, but, if we've identified some paths that the bike consultants have identified as major thoroughfares for San Carlos, why not start there? I mean, I don't think we have to start from scratch. We certainly can leverage the work they've done to test out some of these ideas. And finally, also would be a huge proponent of a shutdown of Laurel Street for all the reasons folks have mentioned. So just want to add a voice in favor of that idea as well. Certainly, doing things, taking advantage of this really unfortunate time that we have to test out some new things, even if in a few months things hopefully can open up and we're in a much better space as a society with regards to COVID. We will have learned some very valuable things about traffic patterns and pedestrian behavior and bicycle behavior in the city. So again, I really think this is a great opportunity to improve safety for cyclists and pedestrians throughout the city and really do something a little bit different. That's all I got.
Great. Thank you, John. I understand we have one more caller.
Actually, looks like two more callers now.
Two more callers.
Two more callers.
Popular subject.
Caller phone number ending in 034. Thank you for joining us for the City Council meeting tonight. You'll have approximately 2 minutes to address the council, and I'll go ahead and start the timer after you introduce yourself.
Great.
And once your 2 minutes is up, you'll hear a beeping, and if you can wrap it up at that point, we'd appreciate it. Okay, so you're currently on mute if you want to go ahead and proceed. Caller number 034, can you hear me?
Yes. This is John Keener from the 1600 block of Chestnut in San Carlos. And I'm in favor of both the Laurel extension concept and also to a certain degree the biking component for safe streets. The biggest thing is right now I think we have a proposal for our specific block to be a pilot, and it's only one block in my understanding. And my concern from that standpoint is that it will lead to some of the studies that were shown of potential social gathering. We have White Oak School right around the block on the other side, and that's an opportunity for people, but it's not used right now because of COVID. So we would be wondering if it would make sense to make a larger project, and that would be part of the study. But under the current structure, I think it's just a one block pilot. That doesn't really make sense for the conditions with COVID of making it accessible and a thoroughfare. So something that's larger scale, and that would be part of the study. So just wanted to share those thoughts. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, John. We still have just one more, or are there others?
I see our last one here.
Great.
I'm going to go ahead and admit them in. Good evening, caller with a phone number ending in 632. Thank you for joining us with the City Council meeting tonight. You will have approximately 2 minutes to address the council, and I'll start the timer after you introduce yourself. And once you start hearing the beeping, that means your 2 minutes is up. And if you can wrap it up at that point, we would appreciate it. And you are now on mute, so you may begin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, this is Sonia Elks, and I wanted to thank everybody for being so eloquent and presenting so much useful information, staff, residents, council, everyone. I am definitely in favor of a Slow Streets pilot project to try it out in San Carlos. Definitely in favor of a pedestrian zone on Laurel Street that would connect to each other. I think I was the one who petitioned the city to designate our block of Chestnut, 1600 block, as a slow street, although I want to make it extraordinarily clear that the goal was never to have a block party. It was just that's the only form, that was what I was encouraged to use to modify. So I think the most helpful for allowing people to exercise safely in a socially distanced way that respects the pandemic situation is routes, connected routes, and especially loops, kind of a motion, something that encourages motion and not stagnation or gathering. We're definitely, no one wants to encourage gathering. It's definitely about exercising and moving people in safe ways. No kid wants to bike up and down the street indefinitely, but they will go around a loop for a long time because it's great exercise and it's essentially a moving meditation. Biking, walking, running, they are all moving meditations. They calm nerves, they strengthen immune systems, they relieve anxiety, and they make us better able to focus and handle adversity, illness included. Biking, I think, might even be the world's most practical source of instant joy. From a mental health perspective, I think this is a more important time than ever to get people out biking, walking, running, rolling, wheelchairing. I saw people in wheelchairs on Mother's Day yesterday out pushing their elderly parents and their small children. It was unbelievable. And I'd love to have the Mother's Day conditions that we had yesterday specifically in certain areas of San Carlos, not everywhere. I don't think that's realistic. People need to move in cars. That's totally understandable. But to select certain streets that are more accessible for people to roll in the street, and still being careful, obviously, of emergency vehicles. Nobody should be in the street if there's an emergency vehicle coming by. We can work on ways to educate our population and keep people doing a good job. But I really think mental health, especially in this anxious time, is a particularly important reason to consider a slow streets movement and a pedestrian zone on Laurel. So thank you. That's my perspective. I've probably forgotten something, but you can always email me. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Sonia. Crystal, are there any other speakers?
I believe that she was our last one.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we probably have some questions of staff. So I am entertaining whoever wants to raise their hand and ask away. I'm not seeing any yet. Adam, go ahead.
Let me unmute here. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Collins. Thanks for the presentation, all the public comments as well. I had a couple questions. I don't know. I guess, Stephen, for you, one of the questions I had is you as you look at this way, and I understand you don't want to put anything permanent in there, but were you suggesting that pedestrians weren't going to walk down the street on a regular basis if we did that kind of closure? That you were...
I'm sorry, Councilman Rack. I think you froze up on my screen a little bit. So I didn't catch the first part of your question.
So you were suggesting, on the diagram, you sort of had a pedestrian walkway on each side, and then you were sort of had that emergency vehicle area open, but I was unclear to me whether you were suggesting that we would not allow or encourage people to walk in the middle of the street on Laurel. I'm understanding, obviously, if there's an emergency, then people would get out of the way, but I just want to understand what sort of you were proposing on that, what you were suggesting.
Well, one of the concerns that I had is certainly if you would take the kind of the box of party thought where you would actually put whatever. I mean, in the travel way, and that's something that certainly would not encourage. Obviously, what we have seen on our community, people are walking, and then essentially if they come up to somebody coming in the opposite direction, in many instances they cross the street and go on the opposite side of the sidewalk. I mean, basically, what I really would want to encourage is people to stay on the sidewalk. That's where pedestrians are kind of the most safest. And so if you do walk in the street, certainly there's always that possibility that you come up with a situation where people a car coming up from behind you, you don't hear. You could be on your cell phone kind of texting or on a phone call and you just don't hear somebody coming from behind you. So that's kind of the issue for us is, I prefer to keep people on the sidewalk as best you can. I mean, certainly I have seen people and joggers, and in fact, certainly lately with the shelter in place where people are walking in the middle of the street.
Right. Stephen, I'm sorry. Let me just, I guess I should clarify better. What I'm speaking about is more if we had a full closure of Laurel Street. It looked like on the diagram that you were suggesting that people wouldn't walk down the middle of the street.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
That's okay.
So in regards to Laurel, no, I mean, basically, what I would envision is that area would be used for pedestrians. So, okay. Where people could actually walk and stroll. I would guess probably, assuming there were a restaurant adjacent to, those sidewalks are probably going to be very busy as a result of this wait staff kind of serving the tables out in the street. So I would envision kind of the streets, at least in Laurel, would actually be, people would actually be in the center of the street. But we would also have kind of a barricaded off. So basically there would be no cars attempting to go into the Laurel Street.
Right. And then I just have two very quick follow-ups on that. So I'm assuming for, the accessible parking that we might lose, is it possible to just have some temporary, if we kept Cherry and Olive open or something, that we could add some temporary accessible parking to kind of help meet that need?
That's always a possibility, or you do some different type of striping, perhaps even in our city parking plazas.
Okay, and then just I assume we're going to have comment later, but my last question is, on the I get the concern about some of the residential streets and things, but could you look at something like I guess it'd be interesting in your thoughts around, like, if we closed on a Sunday Old County or one of the streets over there and let that sort of be a place where people could go and walk and ride bikes. It's sort of less trafficked, or some of those businesses are closed and there's arteries around there. Would you look at that differently if we could sort of put sort of a Sunday barrier around some of those places?
Well, certainly we probably want to look at that. I mean, if it's kind of a non-traditional workday where you could kind of close, something that you might see in like Golden Gate Park, where you could close off the street. Again, kind of getting kind of concurrence from kind of local residents and or businesses that they have no objection to doing it like one day a week, probably on a non-working day. That certainly is a possibility.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, Laura.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. So this question is for Chief Jury. And what I wanted to understand is, since shelter in place has been, guiding us, I've been out doing a lot of walking, and I see a lot of people, moving and not a lot of cars. And I'm just wondering, what has the accident rate gone up or gone down since we've been in shelter in place?
The accident rate has gone down because there's less cars on the road. We've had some accidents, but most of them have been minor. but the accident rate has gone down because the volume of traffic has gone down.
All right. And then as the economy reopens and more cars, right, more people going to work, what is your expectation in terms of what will likely happen given the current orders and our limited activities and that type of thing? Do you have a sense of that?
As far as accidents?
Correct, yes.
It'll be with more cars on the road, there'll be a very good possibility that accidents will go up. Our traffic program will still be the same. Well, it's suspended now, but once we open it up again, it'll go back into place as it was before this COVID crisis started.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Stephen, thank you for the report. Really appreciate the thoroughness of it. One thought that I had, there's certain events that happen on occasion, right? Where in our community, we have a 5K, the elementaries or the middle school used to do this. And the last public comment Sonia made with respect to this idea of loops, creating loops and routes. Would the team feel more comfortable if, for example, we were to do it similar to what where you would, create certain routes throughout the residential community, but do it on, selected days, maybe of the week for a period of time, similar to what we have up at Kenyatta Road, but maybe through the, the flats of San Carlos, where you could allow bikes and pedestrians and walkers to move in a single direction and not make it a competition, right? Because you want to avoid kind of gathering and an official start time, but.
That is something certainly we probably want to consider. I think you would still have to have a certain amount of barricades and closures, that which could impact, various collectors of arterials, and cross traffic. In other words, you probably have to have a year plan and kind of know exactly where you're going to route vehicular traffic so that you keep kind of the pedestrians and bikes kind of separated. That's certainly a possibility, but I think there's some additional planning that we would have to kind of evaluate and, to do those type of loops that you're talking about.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking if it was more of an event-based type of effort, since we're not going to obviously have music in the park this summer or some of these other things, and if there's an interest in the community to trying to find outlets to exercise, perhaps we could think about it on a temporary basis, certain.
I mean, certainly that's a possibility, and we're probably, happy to kind of evaluate that as part of the directions that council gives us.
Laura, I assume you're finished at the moment. And,
yeah, I think it froze up. So I'm done with my two questions.
Thanks. Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is for Chief Dury. I'm just wondering if he could share his opinion on the slow streets. I'd just like to hear from you personally.
Yes, I'm not in favor of the slow streets. It really creates a false sense of security, especially people that are walking around. They think that no cars will be coming through. We can't completely shut the streets down because emergency vehicles will have to go through there. And it's difficult for us to police that. And then people will be entering the street that actually live on that street, but then people will also go down the street that don't really have business there. We'll still use it as a thoroughfare. And it's tough for us to police that. We can't be there all the time to police that specific street. And I know that could be an expectation, but it's unreasonable for us because we have a city to police. And then a lot of people are using these electronic devices, the earbuds and stuff, and that even gives them a false sense of security walking down the street and you can't hear traffic coming up behind you. And then, people let their children play and have the false sense of security to go inside or maybe not watch them as much. And it really creates a burden. I think it's a risk versus reward. And I really think there's too much risk in the Slow Streets program.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate hearing from you on that topic. I have two other quick questions. I'm wondering if anyone on staff has taken a look at Redwood City's slow streets and how that's looking in person? Can anybody share?
Good evening, Mayor Collins and council members. Amy Newby here. As some of you know, I live in Redwood City, and in the last few weeks, I've actually just driving through different neighborhoods have passed at least 4 of the streets that are closed off, if not 5 or 6. It's been either during the week or weekends, mornings, during the day. And every time I make it a point to look and see, are these closed streets being used? And I have yet to see anyone utilizing them to their purpose.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that feedback. And then my other question, I think might be for Greg, and this is changing the topic over to Laurel Street and the loss of parking. I know that's a concern in the community of losing the parking on Laurel Street. And I seem to recall that the city was negotiating with the Samtrans building, potentially parking in that area, in that garage. Another caller tonight mentioned Caltrain parking. I'm wondering if you could just speak to where we are and looking at those different options.
Yeah, I believe we do have an agreement for the Samtrans building now, and there is an agreement related to the trestle project and the transit center, where there's some evening parking in the Caltrain parking lot that's available for public use in the evenings. So there have been some things that the city has done. I'm not sure, and Steve or Al could probably speak to whether how well they're being utilized, but I am aware of those agreements. So they're probably part of the things that we would want to look at is the availability of that parking and how much of it's available for use during peak periods.
We might ask Al to weigh in here as well.
Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get my computer to work here. Yeah, so we do have an agreement with Samtrans. Actually, we're working on completing a long-term lease for the upper floor of the Samtrans parking garage. There's about 50 to 60 parking spaces, and a number of the businesses in the downtown are aware that that parking is available for the public. And then across the street from Cherry Street, we negotiated as part of the trestle project 100 parking spaces for use in the evening from 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. on for the public, and on the weekends during regular business hours. We're still talking to Samtrans about the memorandum of understanding, but we should be able to bring that to the city council in the very near future. But it wouldn't be for that particular parking area, wouldn't be for regular business hours. That wasn't negotiated as part of the original agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you, Al. That's my last question.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I may have anticipated raising my hand. I wanted to make a comment or to start the discussion after we get through Q&A. So if you can keep me in mind for that, that would be great.
Okay. I do want to have a discussion about this, but I think this might be a perfect time to take a 5-minute break. And Crystal, can we pause this meeting for 5 minutes?
Yes, we'll go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll see you all at 9 o'clock even. I'm thinking that maybe our comments discussion should be centered around what sort of direction or items that the subcommittee should be thinking about. But I'll be interested in hearing everybody's opinion on that, and and obviously the subcommittee will have staff input, so I think it's probably a good idea to keep that in mind as well. So anybody in particular want to start off this discussion?
Sure.
Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I like your idea about putting us in the context of a subcommittee, and we still have to vote on that yet, but we'll get set up. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I initially, I think, was one of the people who brought up the idea of closing streets, residential streets, for various purposes. As things evolved, I actually shifted much more towards the idea of, I really like the idea of the Slow Streets program for a bunch of different reasons. That's not to rule out perhaps closing some streets. I think it was either Laura or Adam were talking about there may be some specific long stretches of streets that we should think about closing, as yet another fillip in this whole thing. And I certainly would support that if we can have it make sense. But one of the comments that one of the callers made, I thought was very, very on target, which is we need to recognize the reality of the situation we're in. Okay, there are a lot more people and bicyclists out on the streets. I see that when Barbara and I are walking around. I see it when we're sitting on our porch in the morning. There's just a lot more pedestrian and bicycle traffic than there ever was before. And in that sense, the Slow Street program, to me, besides being a nice thing for pedestrians and bicyclists, it actually is a way of teaching drivers, like, hey, wait a minute, guys, the world has changed. On this street in particular, you need to pay real close attention to what's going on. Don't drive so fast. And I like that. I think that's a really good idea. I had a chance to talk to Joe Goethals of San Mateo and to Alicia Aguirre from Redwood City about this. And they adopted these programs earlier than we're talking about doing, and they really like them. And more importantly, the residents really like them, and they haven't run into any significant problems that would cause them to rethink things. So I think that's another thing in their favor. And then lastly, on the downtown Laurel Street experiment, I'd love to see us actually do that. I appreciate staff coming up with the idea of maybe doing it in the parking lots instead of on Laurel Street, but I frankly think that's a non-starter. And we close Laurel Street for all sorts of reasons. I think if we go through and incur the cost of going, opening and closing on a daily basis, which admittedly is non-trivial, so we're not permanently closing it, I think it would be a reasonable thing to think about doing. And one last point I'd make about that is I do think it's important that we involve the chamber to kind of interface with all of the businesses, not just the restaurateurs. But I think we ought to, the subcommittee ought to think about whether or not when we close that section of Laurel Street down, that we offer the non-restaurant business owners the opportunity to sort of do a little bazaar-like type arrangement. In other words, let them use some space in front of their store to display their wares, okay? Lots of cultures do that. You can get overrun with it, but lots of cultures do it and lots of people love it. So I think there are ways to solve those kind of problems. So I'd love to see us adopt slow streets. I'd love to see us try and find some other roads that we could close down like Adam and Laura were talking about. And I'd love to see us do the experiment on Laurel Street, see how it works out.
Okay. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Rick Collins. Thanks for the comments. And Mark, I hadn't thought about that, sort of the other businesses being able to put some stuff in front of their store. So that's a good idea. I had not, we've been focused so much on the restaurants. So I think I'm in favor of the Laurel Street piece. It's something that, for me, I've talked about before, and I think it's a great opportunity to try to pilot that. I think keeping sort of those side streets of Cherry and Olive open, and obviously some of the details can be worked out through the subcommittee. But and I also think that we've got some opportunities to look at, consider things like the farmers market and where that might go, and are there alternative locations for that potentially, and how we work through those details. And I agree. I don't think using the parking lots is something that I'm interested in doing, to have those be closed. I'd rather have those be for parking and have the street be closed. I am interested in sort of thinking outside the box a little bit about how we might help some of the restaurants like on San Carlos Avenue, and could we utilize other spaces for those restaurants, or is there some temporary solution for them as well, or other as this, if we were to move forward with this, other parts of Laurel, on South Laurel, that maybe those businesses might need some support as well. And then in terms of the slow streets, I mean, I struggle with this because I hear some of the challenges, and we've got a lot of narrow streets, and I think I'd be more interested in, if we could do a Sunday pilot somewhere, or maybe on a larger street, or find some wider streets that might be considered. But I think I'd also just want to understand a little more, because I've heard, I too talked to some of the city council members in some of the other towns that are doing that, and got sort of some mixed results, and mixed response from both San Mateo and Foster City. Did it differently because they have a 4-lane street with parking. They got rid of parking and just gave up one lane on that street. So it's sort of a different kind of program. So that's kind of, I guess, where I am right now in terms of these things.
Okay, Laura.
Thank you, Mayor Collins, and thank you to all of the residents who wrote and shared your perspectives with respect to this particular topic, your ideas and concerns. From my perspective, I'm glad to hear that there's a proposed subcommittee to meet on this, because as we heard from residents, now is the time, and I think we need to be expeditious and thoughtful about this. So I'm hopeful that we can agree to bring that team together to move forward on this. Where I stand on the moment with respect to residential street closures, I'm aligned with trying it out on a temporal basis with a pilot, a certain day of week, or more of an event base, to see how that works, as opposed to shutting down permanently for an extended period of time, particular routes throughout the community. I think at this point in time, there's just not enough data, and I appreciate other communities have done it. But again, I've been spending a lot of time walking through San Carlos the last month, and many of these streets are very narrow. And I worry about the impact on those streets that aren't closed, that are adjacent to the closed ones, with respect to the traffic congestion, parking congestion, because again, so many people are at home. There's a lot of cars parked on the sidewalk. So I would be in favor of looking at some sort of midway point, if you will, for a residential street closure, event-based type effort. And with respect to Laurel Street, I think that one of the concerns I've had just in general is, with the social distancing requirements that are going to be placed on businesses, how in fact are they going to be able to manage this as the economy reopens? And again, just walking down the sidewalks of Laurel, I see one business's colored tape running into another business's colored tape, right? So if the restaurant has a queue for takeout, and then there's a retail location that also has to have a queue, where are all those folks going to go? I think my understanding is that use of public transportation is going to be low for a period of time. So if there could be an exploration, I like the idea of exploring maybe renegotiating parking with Samtrans as well as the Caltrain to expand that. I think that getting stakeholder input from the businesses downtown is going to be very important. Again, a lot of this is focusing on the restaurants, but we also have to recognize that there are other businesses downtown. So, and I do like the idea of giving consideration to those businesses that aren't just on Laurel, but nearby, that are also going to have to deploy the social distancing. There was a suggestion made with respect to maybe we employ valet parking. That concerns me a little bit, just because we'd be asking somebody to get into somebody else's car and park it. And just from the way that COVID-19 spreads, I'm a little concerned about that as a potential solution. That being said, if we could identify other locations for accessible parking, I think that would be important to look at. And I'd also be curious at some point in the future, this staff could give us an update on the bike and pedestrian plan. That would maybe potentially satisfy some of the safe or slow streets, because I know that there's a lot of work that's been underway there, and maybe if we understood where that was in its development process, we could take a look about bringing some of those ideas forward at this time. So.
Thank you, Laura. Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll start with Laurel Street. I do support moving forward with the pilot project. I agree with Laura that, you know, some significant outreach to the business owners along Laurel. I would hope that, you know, I'm sure that we would undertake that, but, you know, I'm sure that there's some businesses that might feel just, you know, they might suffer a little bit by doing this. And I want to make sure that we're working hard to make sure that we're supporting all of the businesses. But I, you know, our downtown is our crown jewel, and I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can as a local government to support our businesses and help them make it through this time. One other thing that I think we should look at is the possibility of parking spilling over into the neighborhoods that are close to Laurel Street. We'll have to just take that into account as well. But I'm glad to hear that the negotiations are close or complete with Samtrans, and if we can explore a little more with Caltrain, I think that might be worthwhile too. As for the slow streets, I've really struggled with it. I'm a mom too, and I've been out on bike rides with my kids, and you know, I take full account of all the people who called in tonight, and I appreciated all of those comments. And I'm still, you know, thinking through the loop factor, and I liked Adam's comment about maybe closing Old County Road on a Sunday morning or something. But the chief's comments about just the safety issues, the strong and serious concerns that he has, that gives me pause. So, you know, I'm sure that's something that the subcommittee can continue to wrestle with. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Mark. You need to unmute yourself, Mark. There
Yes. That's most people don't need to remind me of that, Ron. Thank you. So I just wanted to mention, listening to the comments from some of the other members of the dais, and without trying to limit what the scope of the subcommittee is, my sense from at least what I've learned about the slow streets component of this, if we do something, is slow streets is not closing a street. I mean, you literally are not closing the street to anything. What you're doing is you're putting up signage that basically says slow street, drive slowly, and you're putting it in such a fashion that it forces drivers and delivery trucks and whatnot to recognize, okay, this is in front of my face, I need to react to it. So that's why I mentioned before, it's in that sense, it's kind of an educational thing to say, please be careful when you're on this street. That's really what it boils down to. It doesn't close the street at all. It's a reminder to drivers. So I just want to point that out there, because that was something I hadn't really appreciated early on. So I want to make sure that people are aware of that. Thanks.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Laura?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things I just wanted to suggest, and I forgot to mention it on the Laurel Street, was this idea of, I think it was suggested by staff, one of the opportunities would be look at, again, certain hours of the day to, you know, shut down the street. I'm just thinking about, you know, when is the demand of consumers and what are they looking to accomplish at certain times a day? And I don't have an opinion either way, but I think it, as part of the input from stakeholders, is to understand when the optimal time would be to close the street, if it would be 100% of the time, every day of the week, or, you know, would we shut it late afternoon and evenings, you know, for the dinner hour or some such.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to be thoughtful about this process, and I think we need to be careful as well about what we do, because we have a lot of potential options that we have to consider, and people have a lot of good ideas, but there are consequences and every action has a reaction, right? So, whatever we do there's going to be some sort of a consequence to it. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So as far as the subcommittee goes, I'm going to offer that, Adam and I started talking about this a while back, and we've had a lot of conversations. And if there's no great objection to it, I would like to propose that the subcommittee be Adam and myself. We have, Adam's talked to a lot of business owners, sort of a logical choice, and I too have had a lot of recent interactions with business owners as well. So unless anybody's really clamoring to be on this subcommittee, that's what I would offer.
Mr. Mayor, I certainly have no strong objection to what you're proposing, but I too am very interested and have spent a lot of time talking to a lot of business owners and other stakeholders as well recently. So I would certainly welcome an opportunity to be on the subcommittee.
Okay. All right.
So just Mayor, if I can I appreciate that. I'm certainly obviously interested in, being on the downtown subcommittee as well, sort of ties in with the work with that. And having been on the chamber board before, I think it's just something I have a good outreach in the business community, and I'm interested overall in this topic. So I would welcome the opportunity to be on it with you.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see, we've heard from everybody. I guess at this point we need to decide, we need a motion as to who the members of the subcommittee ought to be. And then we'll take all of these comments. The subcommittee will take all these comments to heart and talk to staff and have some meetings, and then we'll come back with some recommendations. There is
through the chair.
Yes, sir.
And they may not have anything to add relative to the subcommittee, but I didn't hear anything from Sarah or Laura about their interest in perhaps being on the subcommittee.
Oh, thank you. So Laura or Sarah, feedback from you?
I'm happy to defer to whoever else is interested. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Just as long as you do everything I just said, I'm good with it.
I agree.
Always can count on you, Laura, to be going and agreeable.
So I moved to establish and appoint committee members, Ron Collins and Adam Rack, to the street closure ad hoc subcommittee.
I think we need a second for that.
Yes.
I guess I'll second it.
Okay. All right. Do we need a roll call for this, Crystal?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Adam, did you have another?
I guess the only question is, I don't know if are we going to then have a discussion about the authority of the subcommittee? That's sort of part of the item. Is that something we should do now or wait till after the subcommittee's?
I don't have a preference either way. Greg, is there anything? Is there a consideration that we haven't thought of here before we make that decision as well?
Typically, a subcommittee studies an issue and then comes back with a recommendation to the council. If you do something different than that, it might require that the subcommittee, if the subcommittee is empowered to make a decision, it might turn it into a Brown Act body, and it would have to have noticed meetings.
So probably not a good idea to give the subcommittee more than just recommendation authority.
It's unusual to give a subcommittee more than that authority, especially something complex like this.
Right. That's when I saw that, I wondered about that myself.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, if I could add, we just wanted to agendize it that way so that the council had the option of considering it. The only thing that would really sort of speak in favor of that, obviously, is that for the folks on the business side of this, particularly the Laurel Street one, there seems to be a sense of urgency, and that might be a way to move it along quicker. But again, as I said, we just wanted to make sure we agendized it in such a way that the council had the full suite of options available tonight to them.
All right. Well, I'm going to certainly make myself available very quickly, assuming the motion passes as proposed. Same with Adam. Okay. With that, Krista, would you like to call the roll?
Yes. Vice Mayor Parma-Lohan?
Yes.
Krista, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I got a note that said that my connection was unstable.
It's a little bit slow, but we can hear you, I think. Thank you.
Okay, so if you could call the roll.
Okay. Vice Mayor Parma-Lohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
With all due respect and expecting nothing but wonderful work from the subcommittee, I vote no.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, well, we've got our work cut out for us, and we'll get together with staff and we'll get some dates together very quickly. Hopefully, maybe by the next meeting. Do you think, Jeff, we might be able to come up with some recommendations?
Well, I think it's too soon to say. Obviously, it's going to be contingent on yourself and Councilmember Rack's availability to us, as well as obviously the sort of external piece that's outside of our control, how quickly we can get the feedback that you'll be looking for from the business community. But I think the goal in my mind here is that, we're sort of anticipating that, it looks unlikely that restaurants are going to be allowed to open in any regard through May. So I think we need to, at least right now, have the hopeful assumption that June 1st, they may be allowed to, and to try to have a plan in place by then. So, we're certainly going to be moving quickly. My sense from the city council, and we can maybe just get some heads nodding here, is that if the subcommittee feels like they've reached a point where they need to get additional council feedback or they need the council to make a decision and it falls in between council meetings, that the council would be okay with us setting up a special meeting to get back to you in as timely a manner as the subcommittee has reached that point to keep things moving forward quickly here.
Right.
Through the chair?
Yes, sir.
As a practical matter, I suspect that even with the best intentions in the world, nothing could happen before June 1st anyway. But I, personally, unless I'm misunderstanding something, I think we need to remember that part of what could happen through doing something involving Laurel Street wouldn't necessarily have to involve the restaurants themselves physically reopening. So, for example, imagine a situation where there's a bunch of tables and stuff put out in Laurel Street, and effectively it's takeout. Okay, so the restaurants are actually closed, except they're allowed to be open for takeout, but they end up they're more attractive to people because people can go get their takeout and go sit out in the street and enjoy the nice evening and whatever. So the physical reopening of the restaurants is not really, I think, a gating event for this. Although, as I said, I don't think that you're going to be able to get anything done. If you can, that's great. I don't think you're going to be able to get anything done by June 1st anyway.
That's a good point, and we will definitely run that concept by the county. They're whatever they're calling themselves, Greg, the legal task force that's looking at those kinds of things. And if that's a possibility, then that's something that the subcommittee should definitely consider.
Right.
Yeah, I can speak with the county counsel's office and some of my fellow city attorneys about some things that they might be doing in that regard.
I don't want to rush it, but I do know that there are a lot of anxious business people out there who are very worried about their businesses, and I would just like to make sure that we move at whatever speed we can to, make some accommodations for them.
Through the chair.
Uh-huh.
Just one other point, just to reiterate something that I said earlier. I also hope the subcommittee, and whether you use this idea or an adaptation, there are two classes of businesses essentially on Laurel Street, restaurants and retail shops. that bizarre concept where we might allow the non-restaurant business owners to have stall space essentially out in the street or on the sidewalk or whatever, that might be substantially more attractive, or might make the idea of closing Laurel Street substantially more attractive to them. So things like that, in other words, instead of just reaching out to them saying, how do you feel about an idea? It's more like working with them saying, what do we need to do to make this idea attractive to you?
Yeah. Okay. Good point. All right. Well, with that decision done, let's move on to new business. Item 10A is consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a rent forbearance agreements with nonprofit organizations leasing city-owned property. And that, I guess, is Greg.
Yeah, that's my staff report tonight. I'll be brief. The city is a landlord in many cases in town, particularly in the library and the Kiwanis building in Burton Park. We've been approached by two nonprofits that we rent to, and perhaps more. But there's two that we've definitely heard from that are seeking some sort of a rent deferment agreement to help them get through the COVID crisis. They have different reasons why their income has been reduced because of the crisis, but in each case, they've asked for relief. We provided you with a form as an exhibit it's supposed to be an example of what a rent deferment agreement might be like. And the form provides for a 6-month deferral and then a 3-month deferral and then a slow payback of 6 months. But what we've brought before you tonight in the resolution is to give some flexibility to the city manager to negotiate something that works for each of the nonprofits because their situations might be different. Other examples of deferment might be to require a longer payback period because of the nature of the business, or a payback period that results from the renegotiation of the lease to extend its term, but incorporate the amount of the deferral period into a longer period of time under a renegotiated lease. Those are two examples I've thought of, but we're not limited by that in the action that we're asking you to take tonight. It's just we've just heard the request right now, so we don't really have all the information we need to kind of give a concrete recommendation for you on what a forbearance agreement terms might look like. So you have, go ahead.
I was just going to say this is really just, basically authorizing Jeff to enter into an agreement that is in the best interest of both the city and the nonprofit.
Right. And the main thing that is in here, just to be clear, is that the proposal is that there not be any loss in revenue to the city through the forbearance. It's just raised basically how long of a payback period is required and what form that takes. So that's the authority you're giving the city manager to negotiate that type of an agreement.
All right. Crystal, do we have any public comment queued up for this item?
We don't at the moment, but let me go ahead and share the screen for the public to see.
All right. Well, while we're doing that and allowing people to call in if they would like, this is probably a good time to take any questions from fellow council members if they're so inclined. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The quickest button, I'm telling you.
It's right in my laptop is like 2 inches away from my hand. So the quick question I had, Greg, was nothing in what we're doing here prevents us at some future date, if if one of the people that we forbear a rent with comes back and says, hey, look, I can't afford to pay you back, then we can separately discuss that, correct?
No, we could always revisit based on changed circumstances in the future if what we anticipated didn't come to fruition.
Okay, because I'm hoping we get paid back, because it's always good to get paid back, but I'm also recognizing that that may not happen. I mean, many of the other support programs around don't contemplate that. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of Greg by my fellow council members? All right. Crystal, has anybody called in?
No, it doesn't appear, we don't appear to have any callers for this item.
All right. Okay. Well, with that, I think I'd entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 2020-24, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing the city manager to enter into rent forbearance agreements with nonprofit organizations leasing city-owned property.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion second. Any other discussion on this item? All right. Crystal? Oh, I'm sorry, Laura.
Yeah, I guess, thank you. I guess my computer is just that much further away from me than Mark's is from his.
Hand movement.
Teach you how to hit that button quick.
I guess I've got to rehearse. So I just wanted to just point out with this that in light of the extraordinary circumstances associated with COVID-19, many critical not-for-profit organizations are at risk, and much of the programs that I have witnessed come forward are really around small businesses or individuals, and there's very little support that's been generated at a federal level for not-for-profit organizations, and they do play a vital role in our community. And so I believe that this is an important step that the city could take because these organizations are so important to our health and vitality. I do hope that large banks follow our lead when it comes to commercial leases. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other statements before we vote? Okay. Crystal?
Councilmember Brack?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parma-Lohan?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. Next item is item 10B, consideration of adopting a resolution denouncing xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment due to fears of the COVID-19 pandemic and affirming the City of San Carlos's commitment to the well-being and safety of Asian American community. And for that,
Tara Peterson, Assistant City Manager.
hello, Tara.
Good morning, or good evening. It feels like morning. It's been a long day. We're bringing this before council at its request at the last council meeting to bring forth a resolution denouncing xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment due to fears of the COVID-19 pandemic. Crystal, can you move forward the slide, please? Oh, I can control my own? I'll try.
Oh.
It worked. Seen the whole thing, guys. All right. Reports of anti-Asian sentiment have been growing recently due to the COVID-19 virus. According to the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, as the virus has spread, Asian Americans have experienced offensive comments and actions related to their races, such as social profiling, hate incidents, and in some cases, violence. Characterizing COVID-19 as a Chinese virus encourages hate crimes and other attacks against Asian Americans at a time when communities should actually be working together to get through this crisis. COVID-19 is a public health issue, not a racial issue. It doesn't discriminate, and neither should people. Others who have joined this cause are throughout the county. On April 10th, the San Mateo County Asian Pacific Islanders Caucus and Peninsula leaders issued a joint statement denouncing racism and xenophobia. Since that time, other jurisdictions within the county have brought forward resolutions or proclamations intended to stand in solidarity with the Asian American communities, sending a message that discriminatory behavior motivated by hate will not be tolerated. These cities include Belmont, Daly City, Foster City, Millbrae, and San Mateo. In addition, the County of San Mateo has also passed a resolution. San Carlos values its diverse communities. All the way back in 2017, which doesn't seem that long ago, but yet it seems a very long time ago, the City Council declared San Carlos a welcoming city. City Council's current core values within its strategic plan pledge to ensure that San Carlos is a safe, diverse, welcoming, and engaged community. Passing this resolution demonstrates a commitment to our Asian American community during this challenging time and encourages reporting of xenophobic or discriminatory incidents. Passing the resolution has been recommended by the San Mateo County Office of Equity and Diversity as well. Help stop hate. You can help stop hate by contacting the County Office of Diversity and Equity to learn more about the Chinese Health Initiative and other support services related to COVID-19 at the website provided here. You can call 911 and report when you witness or are a victim of an assault, such as a deliberate coughing or sneezing or physical threatening actions. These assaults are hate crimes and they're not acceptable. Or you can register your experience by visiting the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center website, which was launched on March 19th at the two websites provided here. So council action this evening is to pass the proposed resolution with or without changes, or to provide staff with alternate direction. And with that, I can try to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you, Tara. Nice presentation. Crystal, do we have any public comment lined up?
I am not seeing any at this moment, but we'll give them a few minutes.
Okay. So in the meantime, why don't we see if there's any questions by my fellow council members for Tara? I am not seeing any. So, and so far we do not have any speakers.
I'm not seeing anyone call in.
All right. I thought I saw a potential guest. I didn't know if they were going to be invited to speak, but it might have been something on my screen. Okay. With that, why don't we entertain a motion here?
I move to adopt Resolution
2020-25.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos denouncing xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment due to fears of the COVID-19 pandemic and affirming the City of San Carlos's commitment to the well-being and safety of the Asian American community.
All right. Is there a second? Everybody's muted, so I need a second. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. All right, any other comment on this issue? And because I don't see any, this is an unusual situation, I just want to make sure one last time that no one else called in, Crystal?
No, we don't have any callers.
Okay, all right, well then let's call the roll, please.
Councilmember McDowell?
Laura has her hand up, I think.
Oh, Laura, I apologize. I was looking in the wrong direction there. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mayor Collins. So I am in favor of this. I'm glad that the council is considering this. It's very unfortunate that some members of our community seek to blame others for their troubles. Intolerance will not be tolerated, and by adopting this resolution, the City Council will further demonstrate its commitment to San Carlos as a welcoming, inclusive community. So I'm very much in support of this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Laura. And Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second everything that Laura just said. We are a welcoming city and proud of it. It's good to go on record for it. I fully support the resolution. Personally, I also fully support going beyond that to any other ethnic group that may be unfairly attacked in this situation. I've just heard reports of all sorts of people being attacked for all sorts of strange reasons, and none of it has any place in civilized society, let alone in the city of good living.
All right, thank you. And I'll just add finally, as I've said before, no one chooses their skin color. You don't choose your parents. You don't choose your eye color. You don't choose your gender. And to discriminate against somebody because of things that are the result of their heritage makes no sense at all to me. And it's really abhorrent. So with that, why don't we call the roll now?
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parmalohan?
Yes.
Councilmember Rack?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. Now we're on to item 11, which is additional council communications and announcements. And we are going to return to, I believe Mark had mentioned earlier that he wanted to talk about an agenda setting item. So great time, Mark, for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a follow-on to my comments about the serious financial challenges that are currently facing the San Carlos School District and how we might be able to help. The proposal I'd like to make is that the council task, I guess probably the 2+2, our representatives on the 2+2, to meet quickly with the school district and in concert with staff, come back with some proposals that we could evaluate as to whether or not there's a way for us to loan them some money to make a significant difference in the challenges that they're facing. So basically it's tasked the 2+2 to do that work quickly and come back to us with some ideas.
All right. Adam, I want to come to you in just a second. Greg, is there any issue with this approach?
No, right now we are just agendizing something for discussion. You already have a standing committee that can take it up. So you're just directing that committee to look into it right now. That's the way I see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor Collins. And I just want to express my support for Councilmember Olbert's idea. And I would just want to add to it to look at not just sort of a loaning option, but other things that we should maybe think about paying for. Things like the crossing guards come to mind to me. They're sort of a public safety issue, and maybe that's something we just take over the cost of the crossing guards instead of splitting it with the school board. So I'd like to look at kind of both options in the 2+2. But I support your idea. I think it's a good discussion to have.
Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. So Adam and I sit on the 2+2, and I was just looking at my calendar today, and I think we're scheduled to meet in the next couple of weeks before school gets out. So that's a lot of things that I think that we can start discussing, and I'm happy to bring Councilmember Olbert's ideas to the meeting as well. So thank you for raising those, Mark.
Great. Okay. Laura, I didn't miss you this time.
No. So I have a question. So if, from a procedural perspective, so if the 2+2 convenes and Mark is forwarding ideas to that committee, does that create some Brown Act issues?
Yeah, it could. We want to be careful about that. I think bringing it up here at this meeting is obviously different than bringing it up at a later time. But I can talk. If suggestions are to go to the 2+2, there's got to be a way to figure out how to get those types of suggestions to the committee to consider. If we can't, then they can certainly be brought back to when the council reconsiders the matter.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And then am I at liberty to talk conceptually about the relationship between the school and the city at this point, and about this idea in particular?
Yeah, we're on agenda setting. I mean, you probably can only go to state the issue as opposed to discussing it is kind of the line I think is appropriate at this point.
Got it. Okay, so my request would be that we identify areas that are appropriate in terms of the relationship between the city and the school. I think generally speaking, everybody is facing budget concerns at this time. And I know Jeff has shared with us that he'll be working to better understand the impact of COVID-19 on city revenues and what we have to work with. And I do know that the school has been having some challenges with budget in the past. And I believe it was going to be an area that we were going to explore during the budgeting timeframe anyway. So I'm in favor of it, but I think making sure that it's done in an appropriate way, if that makes sense. So in other words, where the intersection of the schools and the city meet, similar to what Adam said with respect to crossing guards, because I think that was mentioned in past. So hopefully that wasn't overreaching.
Through the chair.
Yes.
And Greg, wave your hand or something if I go too far, but just to clarify what I had meant. And by the way, Laura, thank you for pointing out that risk of Brown Act issues. My intention actually was not to communicate anything to the subcommittee after tonight, because I figured this is a public meeting and we're charging the subcommittee, and that's the appropriate forum for doing it. I am personally happy for the subcommittee and working with the district to consider all sorts of different options. My main goal is kind of along the lines of my comment that I made earlier. We need to remember that the sine qua non of why San Carlos is doing as well as it is in part due to great management by city staff, but it's also because everybody wants to live here because of the school district. And so we literally cannot afford to if there's things that we can do without hamstringing ourselves, we cannot afford to let them go down. And what I heard was that they are, just for everybody's benefit, what I heard is that they are actually flirting with the threshold at which, depending on how the numbers work out, they might be, under law, have to be taken over by the state. Don't know if that's true, that's what I heard. And if that's where they are, I can tell you as a former trustee, that's pretty bloody serious. Okay. So, come back with 2 + 2, come back with what's reasonable, but please try and remember to do what we can. Consider what we can.
Well said, Mark. Thank you. Okay. I think you guys have sufficient direction there.
We do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other reflections or comments by any other council members?
Yes, I did, if I may.
Oh,
thank you. I'll try to be brief. The first thing I was going to suggest is we should ask Crystal to see if she can find a voice-activated unmuter for the mayor, so that you can.
I thought I've gotten better throughout the meeting, but
no. Believe me, it's a lot to run the meetings, and remembering to press the stupid button.
Yes,
is not high.
Covered that.
I was also going to ask, and this may not be possible, if there's a way that Crystal could find out if we can screen the callers that are coming in to deal with the issue we dealt with tonight, where people were calling in on basically the wrong item. They didn't know any better, but they were, rather than, dump them into the meeting itself. And in that regard, I was thinking that maybe we could even do, if we could do nothing else, we could do something as simple as when we put up that slide that says, call in if you have a public comment. Maybe we could put on there the name of the item, that we're talking about, like general public comment, or we're talking about this or that or the other thing, so people would know. They'd have a bit of a cue.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The last comment I was going to make is, I know that this is a very stressful time, and I very much appreciate all the work that staff is putting into stuff. I did feel a little bit that some of the stuff in the items on the street closure, slow streets, whatnot, I felt that in some cases it was almost like a literal analysis of a question that we had asked, as opposed to yeah, that's what you asked, but here's a way to actually do what I think you want us to do. And so to the extent that we can stay focused on the latter, that would be really helpful, because that's what we generally do anyway. And I think it would help move the discussions of the council along.
Okay. Any other final thoughts? Okay. Any comments by staff or city administration, city administrative business?
Nothing additional this evening, Mr. Mayor.
All right. The next item is closed session, and Greg, I wanted to ask you, normally after a closed session, we come back into a open session and we formally close the meeting. I was in a Caltrain meeting last week where we went into closed session, and it was announced beforehand by our council that she was going to report out on the closed session at the next board meeting. And I'm wondering if that procedure is something that we might be able to follow here rather than opening back up the general public meeting only to say that there's no report out and then close it.
Well, that's one of those things where I think it depends. If an action is taken, sometimes it needs to be reported out, but I don't anticipate that tonight. So why don't you could, I don't think in this case, it's just going to be, we're going to toggle back into the regular meeting, and we could just say the closed session ended and there was no report out of closed session. It just requires somebody to do that. So I'd be glad to do that right after we close out the closed session if people want to sign off. But
okay,
it's sometimes it has to be in the same meeting, so I'm not comfortable doing that in advance.
Okay, so I would, and I'll leave the logistics of that to you and Crystal.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then with that, we are going to adjourn to closed session, and I think I need a little bit of direction from Crystal at this point. Do we close out, Crystal, or are you
No.
going to extend us a message?
Yeah, if you can stay where you're at, you're going to see a little pop-up soon that's going to ask you to join the breakout meeting.
Okay, great. If there's no other comments or business, this meeting stands adjourned.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.